Reddit. What's the most sure thing you've seen someone frick up? I was once offered a job. The written offer was like 2 feet from me on a desk. I could see the cover letter, was chatting with HR and could feel the energy change. She put a folder over the offer and said we will be in touch. I arrested a guy once for stabbing someone in the neck with a broken beer bottle. He was released from jail with a reasonable bond. Less than 30 days later he stabbed someone else in the head with a screwdriver. I couldn't help but think, you really just had one job. All you had to do was refrain from any more major stabbing until the current case was resolved. After that one, he went to prison. Jeez. Co-worker. So I just press 9 and then a 1 and then the number on the fax machine to send it, right? Me. Yep. Just remember, don't. Co-worker. Great. That's what I thought. Co-worker proceeds to dial 911 on the fax machine, causing a phone call from dispatch and a few squad cars showing up at our location to make sure everything was okay. Till you can fax the police. One of my best friends and high school cross-country teammates had a rather large scholarship to run at a university near where we live. His dad died when he was 2 years old and he had a sizable amount of money in a trust controlled by his grandma. Got on an anti-authority streak, spent it all partying and on drugs, dropped out of college. I get that college isn't for everyone, but he had it all handed to him and threw it away. I knew a kid like this. At 16 he hired a lawyer to force his way into his trust fund. 3 years later he'd blown through so much of it that he sold all his expensive crap, bought an Accord, and started trying to get back in his family's good graces. I got accepted to a biomedical program straight out of the army. I chose to come home to my girlfriend instead of going. She cheated on me. We broke up. The opportunity was gone. Several years ago, my mom got my brother's girlfriend, now estranged wife, a job as a CNA at the hospital she worked at. The job itself wasn't much, but it paid better than most CNAs. You were full-time at 32 hours. There was shift bonus, excellent insurance that kicked in after 90 days, and had even offered her a full ride to nursing school. She wanted to be a nurse, but it was cost prohibitive. She did well for the first couple of weeks. Then, she found out she was pregnant, started having morning sickness and called off every opportunity she got. The funny thing about it was she was only sick right before her shift. After she called in, she would get up, smoke pot, and go spend money that my brother and her simply didn't have. Eventually, she neglected to even call in and got herself fired. It really pissed my mom off since she was the one who risked her reputation for someone who ultimately made her look bad. Extreme Home Makeover did an episode not far from my hometown, near Atlanta. It was the usual story. The family in the episode had fallen on hard times and desperately needed this house. The house was built and it was absolutely incredible, and you'd think they lived happily ever after. Just a few years later, the house was lost to foreclosure because the father put it up as collateral for a business loan. I know a few other people like this. They could have everything handed to them and they'd still find a way to frick it up. Do you like horses? Okay, everything will be a horse theme for you. I'm going to go with the Casey Anthony trial. I mean, it wasn't as much of a sure thing as people imagine it to be, but the prosecution also fricked everything up. They just kept trying to argue things that their own goddamn witnesses disproved. One great example was the chloroform evidence. They put on Arpad Vass and had him testify that the levels in the trunk were so ridiculously high he'd never seen anything like it. Okay, fine. But then the very next witness they called was an FBI chemist named Rickenbach. He testified about finding chloroform, but they didn't ask him his opinion on the levels. So the defense did, and he testified that the levels were very low, consistent with cleaning products, which is what the defense was trying to argue. So now, the prosecution has to impeach their own dang witness and explain why this FBI chemist who they themselves put on the stand doesn't know what he's talking about. And yet people wonder why the jurors weren't swayed by the chloroform evidence. Another example is the car testimony. Supposedly, Casey put her body in the car on the 16th and the foul smell in the trunk a month later was there the entire time. The problem is, 3 of their own witnesses testified they were either in the car or right next to the car when Casey opened the trunk, and it smelled fine during the entire time frame when, according to their theory, it should have been at its peak. Heck, The defense even presented a statement from George where he claims to have actually seen in the trunk well after Kaylee's death. At the time, he gave the police a full inventory of items he saw and rotting corpse wasn't on the list. How does the car not start smelling until well over a week after the body was removed? How is no one seeing or smelling the body when Casey willingly opens her trunk in front of people? These are big holes in the state's case. It went on like this through the whole trial. The prosecution just kept having to explain why their own witnesses were supporting what the defense was arguing. Everyone thinks the state did really well because the media coverage was so one-sided. That's not what happened. A friend of mine once messed up boxed Kraft macaroni and cheese by mixing all the ingredients it said to add at the same time before the water was even boiling. I had this really rich high school teacher my junior year. He had started his own chemical company and sold it for millions. Then decided to become a high school teacher to make a difference in kids' lives. Whenever we had some downtime, he'd always give us life advice. Our favorite question to ask him was, how do we get rich? His answer each time was, go home after school and immediately invest as much money as you can in Tesla stock. Electric cars are obviously the future, and Tesla has the lead on bringing them to market. He must have given us this lecture 6 times throughout the school year. It even became an inside joke between the students who had him as a teacher. This was in 2008. Tesla stock was $8.11 a stock. Yay. I never took his advice. Tesla stock is now worth $320. Aaron Hernandez. All he had to do was not do hood rat crap with his friends. Play ball, collect millions and ride off into the sunset, a legend with said millions. Seriously, he gets paid to do what he likes, and paid. All he had to do was not murder someone. But nope, got to murder someone. He's obviously not a very smart person. Some people could have the world handed to them and would rather play in the dirt. A date and crazy sex. Friend of mine liked this girl who was also a friend of mine. She liked him also and badly wanted to hook up with him. No strings attached, so I went through the motions with setting them up on a date. The perfect date, even, which was more a formality before the sexy time. All he had to do was show up and entertain her and that'd be it. Except the plonker, my idiot male friend, shows up for the date in joggers and trainers and as high as a kite in a thunderstorm. He proceeds to spend the entirety of the date talking about his exes and how they were all B. How he thinks her dress is a little too short and how his family doesn't want him to end up with a girl from her part of the country. Needless to say, the date ended very early and she punched me for my efforts. I did hook up with her though, a couple of days later, so I guess that's a silver lining. Pulling off the long con. I lived in the dorms with a guy who had a full ride scholarship. Smart guy, was valedictorian in high school. The trouble is, he stopped going to class entirely after 2 weeks. Absolutely did not attempt to pass his classes. He convinced them to let him try another semester with the full ride and proceeded to do the exact same thing. Expelled. It's been 10 years and he still works at the campus food court. Meanwhile, those of us that made an effort got stuck paying full cost of attendance. Knew a guy a while back. Dude was an amazing pole vaulter. Like, he was freaking incredible at it. Probably would have been an Olympian. So, he got a full ride scholarship to University of Arkansas, which is a really freaking good track and field school. Go Hogs. Anyways, all this mother had to do was not smoke weed, go to pole vault practice, and bang hot UOF girls. Well, the first 2 were apparently impossible for him. He ended up immediately losing his scholarships for a combination of failed drug tests and missing practices and not going to class, etc. Fast forward to that summer and he's drunk and high and ends up breaking his hip trying to jump off a tree into the river. Career over. Haven't seen him in years. Hated that story. I wish he'd just have tried. So many people would take natural talent like that and go to the moon with it. A friend of mine was applying for an apprenticeship at a large company. Another friend already has an apprenticeship there, and he coached him through what to expect from the interview and how best to handle the group selection stage, where he would do problem solving etc in a group of other potentials in front of the employer. He'd had a 3-week head start as he was told about the position before it was advertised publicly. He'd been told exactly what the bosses were looking for, as our friend had nonchalantly asked the interviewer about it at work. And to top it off, On day before the interview, the guy had snooked into his boss office, gone through his desk and photographed the interview and problem solving plan, and sent it to him. So he knew every question and solution to every problem. He never got the position because he strolled into that interview with a smug grin looking like he owned the place, and the employer thought he'd be an insufferable tit to work with. He wasn't wrong. Snook. I knew a guy in college who was in the same scholarship program as me, but his was a full ride. Mine was partial. We had to go to the same meetings and stuff for our scholarships, so we got to know each other a bit. He was there on a full ride, had his room paid for and even a stipend for personal expenses. He had a sweet deal that people would kill for, at a school that was just shy of Ivy League. He got addicted to World of Warcraft, stopped going to classes and lost his scholarship. I get that addiction is a disease, but seriously? World of Warcraft, that's what killed your dream? Best friend witnessed me crash and burn picking up a girl. Went to a club with my best friend at the time and were winging for each other. After buying a few girls drinks, I get pretty sloshed. Next thing I know, I'm talking to this really cute girl. I honestly don't even remember how she looked like, but only know this because my friend rubbed it in my face for months. My friend repeatedly comes over and tells me to get her number. I wave him off like, don't worry, I got this. Ask for a napkin and pen from the bartender. She knows what's going on and gives me a high five. I proceed to write down my information and tell her I gotta go. As I walk away, I see her read what I wrote down and give a serious WTF face. I gave her my Flickr website address. Truly WTF dude, lol. Night freaking up The Last Airbender, a show with a sizable, built-in fan base, opportunity for flashy special effects, a call for many young actors, meaning you get to cast unknowns and save on your budget, significant appeal to the Asian box offices, basically the entire plot already storyboarded for you, the bones of a unique, quality host already made and cartoon composer already accustomed to working with a full orchestra you could probably get for cheap, an insane budget for a director with 2.5 duds under his belt, strong female and minority roles, fight choreographers who had literally spent at least 4 or 5 years working with the IP. Literally the only thing he had to do was cut out the filler, cast quality actors and collect his paycheck. 90% of everything was already done. He could have lifted entire stretches of dialogue and set designs and no one would have blamed him. He was given an already baked cake and told to put frosting on it and instead decided to substitute the cake with a heap of cow crap with some glitter on it. The casting direction was a dumpster fire. For a show completely entrenched in Chinese culture and arts, he not only didn't cast any East Asians for leading roles, but had pretty much an all-white cast save an Indian as the anti-hero. He needs to Shyamalan his way back to directing more atrocities like The Happening before he touches another major franchise again. A friend of mine was enrolled in college with a special scholarship program. It's essentially a full-ride scholarship for smart kids from poor families, first-generation college students, etc. The program paid his tuition, fees, even gave him a stipend each semester for textbooks and housing. All he had to do was pay utility bills, his phone bill, and pay for food. The program had some pretty strict requirements. They would only pay for 8 semesters, standard 4 years. You had to go to a certain number of meetings. You had to take a full course load, at least 12 credits per semester, and you had to have a reasonable GPA, I think a 2.5 or so. This fuckwit blows his fin-aid money and stipends on liquor, video games, expensive new gadgets that he breaks and won't pay to repair. He has literally told me he was excited for his new Xbox but didn't know how he was going to pay the rent that month. To cover his living expenses, he takes out the maximum allowable amount of student loans, pays his rent for the semester, and manages to blow all the rest on eating out for every meal, going out drinking almost every night, and just generally buying tons of expensive crap, like game consoles and other new electronics. He stopped going to the meetings, his GPA went into a downward spiral, and he lost the scholarship his junior year, but got it back his senior year, because he didn't want to take a full course load. Then it took him 2 years to graduate, and the scholarship didn't cover those extra 3 semesters, so he took out more loans. Then he didn't turn in a final paper for a class, and failed, and didn't even try to contact the professor to try to sort it out or get an extension. So he technically didn't graduate. It took him 3 years to go back, take a class to make up those credits, then finally graduate. Then he started applying to grad schools. He's a smart guy, at least on paper, but his GPA was pretty bad. As soon as he found an MFA program to accept him, he jumped on the offer and will be graduating another $70K in debt, on top of all his undergrad debt, probably another $20K. His plan to avoid paying these loans. Note that the monthly payments will be higher than his monthly rent and monthly income combined, is to go straight into a PhD program and defer the loans for another 5-10 years while he writes a dissertation. This from a man who had trouble turning in a 10-page paper in college. I love him to death, but the man has no goddamn common sense. It was one of those movie moments. Dude scored the game-winning goal at his soccer game at the last second, went charging off across the field high on adrenaline and caught in the moment, jumps around doing the normal homoerotic sports crap. This girl he had a crush on for years, just an absolutely stunning girl. She come running to him, arms extended. He gave her a dual high five and ran off. Plot twist. The dude in the story was me, and I still kick myself for that, over 10 years later. Beautiful. My buddies and I went to junior prom with some girls in a town over, and my one friend's date was giving him a back rub after we got back to her house for a party. She eventually went to crack his back and he basically told her that she couldn't do it. She decided to accept the challenge and started walking on his back. He immediately farted from the unexpected pressure. The night ended with him drunkenly asleep with his tie half off, instead of in her bed. Farts happen. I was out and about with some friends in high school when we decided to take a shortcut home, which involved going over a dry stone wall into a field. It was literally about waist height, if that, and we all climbed over easily, except for one guy, who decided to get fancy and jump over it. He ended up catching his pant leg, tearing said pants, and face planting pretty freaking hard. So we had to take him back to his house and explain to his mum why her son was nearly missing a pant leg and bleeding. This might not fit perfectly, but I once had a roommate that fricked up Easy Mac. He took off the lid, poured the cheese on it, and stuck it in the microwave. He was completely clueless as to what he had done wrong. When I told him he didn't add any water, he was shocked that they wouldn't put that step anywhere on the container. So I turned it around and showed him the 3-step instructions printed right on the sides. I got out of that room as soon as I could. My mom did that at Disney World and evacuated a floor of the hotel at midnight. Once in my younger days, my wife, I and a longtime friend were at a house party. Some illicit drugs were consumed and a good time was being had by all. We were all sitting on a couch and 2 girls were sitting on another couch chatting. One looks at the other and loudly proclaims that my friend is so hot and she can't wait to feel him inside her. He left with us without having sex. To this day I give him absolute heck about that. My mother married this guy, husband number 5 for those of you following crazy stories about my mother, who was making $3,000 every month. Had 2 trucks, a boat, his own 2 and a 1/2-story house. Attic was a half-story, 5 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, nice kitchen, 4-car garage. Overall a nice freaking house. All she had to do was play housewife, keep the place nice and being loving. Dude bought her a new car, was making payments, paying off her debt. She had a free ride in life. She fricked it up after a year, made up a dozen fake butt excuses, then divorced the guy. Tried to take everything of his. Court said frick her for trying to frick over this guy. She got $3,000 and the items she had before marriage. To this day, the guy and I are still friends and he see me as one of his extended family. I was out with a group of friends for St. Patrick's Day and there was a guy who I knew had a huge crush on me. We flirted all night. I was going to drag him back to my house for sure. Then he disappeared. Found him 15 minutes later sucking face with some other chick. He still went home alone that night and I never gave him another chance after that. Our group ripped on him mercilessly for like a month after that. Sounds like you waited too long. High school guy who played football. Good enough that a professional football player who lives part-time in our town offered to introduce him to people in the NFL to give him an in, so to speak. Turned it down. Last time I saw him, he was working at Kmart. Not a sure thing, but a great opportunity that he turned down. College roommate forgot to put water in the microwave with his ramen. He was not under the influence of any substance. This snowballed into the fire department coming and our whole dorm evacuating. It also resulted in me losing my ranked match of Rocket League. Last year had a bunch. The Warriors losing the championship, the Indians losing the World Series, the election, and then there's this year's Super Bowl. Many moons ago, worked in a liquor store, night shift. We had a new guy come in. New guy had already broken a couple of bottles while unpacking the rye, but when the new guy knocked over a whole stack of boxes of 24s of rye, I knew new guy wouldn't last long. It was one of those slow motion things. You saw it happening from a distance, and saw it coming, but there was nothing that could be done. He was clean up duty for a while after that. I dated a girl who did not have common sense. She was thinking about leaving her current job, which she liked but which didn't pay her well, and told her boss that she was interviewing elsewhere. Her boss offered her a good raise and a promotion to stay. Her response was to seek advice from a bunch of her co-workers, telling them what had happened and what they were offering her, which knowing her was probably a form of humble bragging. Her co-workers got told the boss that if all it took to get a raise was to threaten to quit, they could do that too. Her boss called her into his office and fired her over it. TLDR. X not only lost her promotion but also her job because she couldn't keep her mouth shut. It's been 4 years of college with my one buddy who has yet to hit the garbage can when throwing something out. He does the classic basketball toss and misses every time. No matter the distance. He could be a foot away, he still misses. It's kind of impressive actually. Sophomore year in college, one of my roommates who wasn't particularly good with ladies was getting ready to go to bed one night towards the end of a small social gathering at our house. He was brushing his teeth in the bathroom when I walked past to grab something from my bedroom when I overhear a girl's voice. "What does a girl have to do to sleep with you?" Overhearing this, I stopped a sec to listen and he responds, "I don't know what to tell." She came running out crying and a week or two later he complains about never getting any girls. SMH. Good friend was on the basketball team in HS. She got to shoot 2 free throws. Somehow, she sprained her ankle doing so. They had to carry her off the court. Not very funny, but I know a guy who's basically 300 pounds of neck-bearded nice guy who will only date model quality girls and tells women they're too fat for him even though he literally weighs twice what they do. One time during a weekend festival, a girl took a shine to him. She wasn't very bright, but was nice and pretty cute. She kept giving him increasingly obvious clues that she was into him and wanted to hook up, but he was too busy bitching about how women only go for jerks and that he's too nice. She honestly couldn't have made her interest more obvious if she lifted her dress over her head and screamed, "So me right here, big boy." Eventually he told her that she was too fat. She was no more than middlingly plump, and that he doesn't date handicapped women. She had a hearing aid. Yeah, I've never seen a sure thing evaporate quite that fast in my life. What an shat. Groups in my class were answering a multiple choice question. There were 4 answers. The first 3 groups got it wrong. The last group got it wrong. The Democratic presidential campaign and the 2016 election. Seriously, you had that guy to contend with. You chose to nominate the only person capable of losing to him. It's your own fault and you need to admit responsibility. It's not like you picked somebody who was only unpopular in secret. People have been very open about widespread dislike for her. You've still decided to pick her. In college, a really attractive girl liked a guy who was in my group of friends. She asked us for help to arrange a solo meeting between the two so she could make her move. We played it smooth, and when he went to the bathroom we all slipped out from his room and left her there alone with him. It was literally brought to him on a silver platter, but like 5 minutes later he catches up to us and has no clue whatsoever why we left him. We proceeded to do this another 2 times throughout the evening and he kept finding us and getting annoyed that we ditched him. Needless to say, she was very turned off by his lack of social cues and lost interest. After moving to the Midwest at 16, for better or worse I assimilated. I go hunting, love driving pickups, heck I even owned a horse. However, there is one thing that I must say for my soul's sake. Pizza here freaking sucks the sweat off of a dead monkey's balls. I worked at a pizzeria as a teen in Brooklyn, and god dang it are my jimmies rustled. You roll out the dough, throw a pinch of salt, a tiny bit of olive oil, spread some sauce, toss on some mozzarella and ricotta, then you put it in an oven hotter than heck for about 2 minutes tops. Seriously, how freaking hard is it? The pizza here is either gummy as frick, way too thick, or fricking Chicago. Oh, and don't get me started on how these suckers can't fold a goddamn pizza. They either use a fork and knife or just let it flop around like a limp dong. Literally every day I see people forget how to drive. Red means stop, green means go, left lane is for passing, turn signals. That's it, there's nothing else, just do these 4 things. The woman I fancied at work asked me if I wanted to stay at hers when we were both drunk at her leaving drinks. I stupidly said no. I told, insert male co-worker, I'd stay on his sofa. Stupid drunk butt brain. The hottest girl in school once showed up at my house late at night because she said she wanted to go car shopping. She was looking for a new car. I know nothing about cars, but I really liked her and thought it would be fun to hang out. We walked around the empty car lot, then she drove us 5 miles to downtown where she parked the car and said nothing. I was dumbfounded. I honestly could not think straight. I couldn't convince myself that she might actually just want to make out with me. So, after half an hour, she drove me home. We accomplished nothing that night. Not cars, not kissing, nothing. Another time, when I'd moved into an apartment, she called me up at night and asked if she could come over and watch TV. I said that was fine, but I had to work early, so to just let herself in. She did not come over. The election. It really does take a truly crappy candidate to screw up. The woman card. OMG, I'm totes voting for her because she's a woman. Having every celebrity endorsement. Having every celebrity speak out against the other candidate. Having every big news outlet on your side while slandering your opponent endlessly. The fact that being a Trump supporter was highly stigmatized, and still is, which caused a lot of them to keep quiet for fear of ostracism. And somehow still finding a way to lose. What a dumbass. Democrats in the 2016 elections. It really should have been easy to wreck the GOP. They had nothing to run on. They chose the more incompetent political candidates in modern political history. But the Dems were just so obnoxious, and so off-putting, and so tone-deaf, and so out of touch, and so corrupt, that they threw it all away. I think the real problem was Hillary. No one wanted her outside of the DNC and a few establishment loyalists. There were much better, more inspiring alternatives. Cough, Sanders, cough. But she was rammed down our throats, and attempts to actually win progressives and independents over were replaced with appeals to party unity and basically telling us, look, you don't like her, but this is who you get, so you better vote for her or else. And then the people of PA, MI, and WI took the or else option, causing Hillary to lose, when just about every prediction going gave Clinton a considerable electoral lead, and she had a consistent electoral lead leading up to election day, and surprised, she lost. She got nothing. Good day, mom. Everything HRC touches she kind of screws up with hubris. Colin Powell. I normally vote Republican or Independent, but had Sanders been running this year I would have actually voted Democratic for the first time in my life, and I'm sure there were plenty of people who would have done the same. I offered a friend free room and board till they could get on their feet. They arrived and sat on their butt for 5 months, not cleaning up after themselves for their animals. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.